now we will go and write a simple Apex program, and we will learn how to write Apex class and what is this keywords. So let me go and explain the same screen. See, whenever you write a class, Apex class, right, it will be written like this. This is the signature of a class. So you have to give the access specifier. What is this public? Public is nothing but the access specifier. Understand this access specifier, okay? Access specifier is something which will help you to call this class. As you know, the Apex class is a kind of a bucket where you go and add things. Okay, you're dumping a lot of different stuff inside the bucket, and a lot of different stuffs are nothing but the methods. Now, I told you, right? Let's say you have written a method called. Now, let's say you have written a method called duplicate check. This method will not work automatically. You as a developer have written the method. Now you have to call the method. What do you mean by calling a method? Whenever a lead gets created, you have to execute this method. That's called calling, right? So now this calling is actually depend on what type of access specifier you have defined in the class and in the method level. There are different types of access specifiers are available, like private, public, and global. Global in Salesforce Apex, that's the highest access specifier. So if you make a class global, then you can use that particular class, or inside the class whatever method you have written, in anywhere in this particular Salesforce org, which means you can execute this particular class and its method anywhere from whatever you want inside this particular org. And in fact, let's say we will be learning something called integrations. That comes in the advanced Apex development, where we will see how can you integrate Salesforce with the different third-party system with the help of Apex coding. Now your Apex class, if it is global, then it will be helpful for you to call this class from a different third-party system, suppose. So access specifier is basically tells you if it is, let's say, suppose private, then this class is private. Whatever method you have written inside the class, you can only call, you can only execute those methods inside the class itself. You can't, this class is private, so you can't call it from anywhere else. You can reuse the method. You can't call the method from different place. That's the private. So we have private, public, and global access specifier, which define you can use this class or method from where, right? It's not about writing the code in your Apex class or a method. You have to execute the class or method from somewhere, right? So this access specifier will help you to do that. Then whenever you define a class, you have to write this keyword called CLASS class. That's the keyword that you have to write after you write the access specifier. Let's say I'm writing here global. Save. If you have some syntax error, there are two types of error in the Apex class. One is compile time error, one is runtime error. Compile time error means, let's say I have by mistake I have given some thing like this. Now whenever you try to save this, you will get an error, because that's something, it's not as part of the syntax. Do you see here? If you check this out, there's a star. It means this class has not been saved. And if you see the red color exclamation mark, it says that in this line there's a problem. And if you want to go and identify what is the problem, just go and check this problem tab. So the error message you will find in the problem sections. If you go to the problem, this is what it tells you. Okay, line number 1, this is the problem, extra bracket and this, right? So just remove it and then click on Ctrl S. So this time there is no star marks. That means the class has been saved. So this is called compilation error. Compilation error means it will not allow you to save the data, save the Apex class if there is any syntax error. Sometimes you get no error whenever the record gets saved. So syntactically everything is fine. So there is no compilation error. But Whenever you execute the method, whenever you call this method from somewhere, you get the execution error. That's called runtime error. Whenever the Apex class is being executed, you get the error. That's called runtime. I'll give an example. In Salesforce development, we will learn something called governor limit. Okay, we will be exploring something called multi-tenant architecture, and there will tell you that you can't do anything you want inside Salesforce as a developer. You do have some restriction and you have to follow it. Suppose you have not followed that restriction, you have written the code, so syntactically everything is fine, right? But the moment you run that code, the limit will be hit, the limit will be exhausted, and you will get a runtime error. So there are two types of error you found. One is syntax error, that's called compilation error, which will not allow you to save this program until unless you fix it. And how do you fix it? You have to go here in the problem tab and you will be able to find it out. And then you have something called runtime error. Runtime error is basically whenever you run the program, whenever let's say a lead is getting created, you're calling this dup check method. The method has been executed, but while executing this method, let's say you got some error. That's called runtime error. Okay, so there are two types of error. Now we are very much clear what is global, what is class, what is this class name. This is just the class name. You can give whatever you want. Class always starts with a bracket and ends with a bracket. So I prefer to write this bracket like this so that it, when the program is little bigger, right, it helps me to identify that where my bracket is opening and ending. If you write your code here in this editor, so it tells you clearly, okay, this bracket is opening and ending over here with this green color. You get to know. Whenever you write a method, what is method? Method is exactly the bundle in the class which will have your business logic. Now whenever you write a method should have the access specifier. Understand this, okay? The method access specifier will be lesser than the class. What do you mean by this? It means, let's say I'm making the method access specifier as global. By the way, global is the highest access specifier, okay? And the class I'm giving as public. The moment you save this file and save, you got an error. This is the error. Line number 3. The error is defining type of global method must be declared as global. Yeah, so it means if you are declaring a method as global, the class, which is the the kitchen and the house concept, right? Kitchen is inside the house, so your house has to be global in order to make your kitchen global. It means if let's say outsiders have to access your kitchen, then if the entire house is locked, then nobody can access it. You have to make sure your house is unlocked first. Your house is accessible to access the kitchen. Same way, if you want to make your method, if you want to give your method higher access specifier, you have to make sure that the class that contains the method should have the higher or same level of access specifier. You get it? So I can give here public, and here also I can give public. Now let's say sometime what happened, we use private as the access specifier of the method. What happened is, one example, understand this. Sometime what we do is we write a very big program, and the program where we have to calculate many things. Suppose we have to perform some DML operation, we have to perform some update operation through the Apex method. But before you update, you have to check and calculate so many if else things. So the calculation, suppose you are doing in a separate method inside the same class. You are calling the calculation method from another method. What I mean is this. Suppose this is your class, okay, and you have written methods, okay? So this is a method, okay, and this is another method, this is another method. All these methods are performing some business logic, and you have written one more method here this particular method which is calculating something. Okay, this method is calculating something. Now let's say you have to call this method from this particular method. Okay, you have to call this method from this particular method, this method. You're calling the same method from multiple places inside the same class, by the way. I'm just going to give you a theoretical knowledge here, but you just have to understand the theoretical how it works. Later I'm gonna write a program and show you what exactly I'm trying to explain. What I'm trying to explain here is I have a method here which I am calling multiple time inside the same class. You get it? If that is the case, then this method has to be private. Okay, so that this particular method should not be accessed outside of the class. This method is what I'm just calling from this method, this method, this method, and this method. But I'm not calling this method from a different class itself. If that is the case, then you have to make this particular method as private. Again, sometimes what we do is this. Or let's say you have one class. Okay, and this class has a method. Okay, and this method, you have another class, you have one more class. You're actually calling this particular method from this class and from this class as well. Now this method has to be public. You're getting me? This method, you're calling it from this class and this class, so this has to be public, or else how can you call it from outside of the class? Got it? So we first have seen a scenario where this is a class and we have a method 1, method 2, method 3, and there is a method which we are calling from inside the same class from the different method. If that is the case, then this method should be private. Okay, and in the other hand, where I have seen that I have called this particular method from not only from this class but also from outside of the class. If that is the case, then this method has to be public. So this is the concept of private and public methods. Okay, we do write a lot of private method, by the way. I'm gonna show you by implementing one example. So I hope this public thing is clear. Now it comes static and void. These two keywords I'm gonna explain in the next video. Okay, after we learn a little bit more, I'm gonna tell you what is these two keywords. Okay, every single word should have a meaning. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about this later. And this is just your name. See, Apex is not case sensitive, so it doesn't matter if you give small d and capital D, no problem. But ideally we should follow, if it is a class, then H, hello world, H should be capital, W should be capital. If it is a method, D should be small but C should be capital. This is called camel casing, right? We have to follow that, but there is no restriction. You can, technically you can write hello world H as small and W as small, which doesn't look good, right? You have to always maintain this best practice. So I think the how to write a class and how to write a method is clear in this video. Next video, I'm gonna write few variable inside the class and inside the method, and we'll learn what is variable inside Apex. Okay, see you in the next video.